Hello, and welcome to my channel! My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my ranking of the books by John Jackson Miller. I am an avid reader and fan of John Jackson Miller's works. I remember when I first picked up my first books of his that I read, which I read A New Dawn and Kenobi during the summer of 2016, and I loved both of them. And I decided I want to read more of his works, and I also decided that I want to read his upcoming stuff. And since then, I've been a huge fan of his. In fact, when I started getting into podcasting years ago, for a now, not a podcast. He was my first ever interviewer. And I also interviewed him recently for the YouTube channel. So check out that interview. We talk mostly about his Batman book, but we talk about other things as well. And then I've just continued reading his works. He writes Star Trek, which I love. He writes Star Wars stuff, which I love. He's just now most recently written a Batman novel, which was terrific. You can check out my review of that. And he's also done a bunch of comics. And I'm not ranking the comics today because that'd take forever. And also, I haven't read all of them. But when it comes to prose, I've read his prose. There is a Star Trek novella that is not in print. It is only an ebook. Grr! So I will not be including that in my ranking. But all of his Star Trek novels, which I believe there's like 8, his Star Wars novels, which there's like 4. He has an original novel, a Batman novel. He has a short story collection for Star Wars, and he has a novella that was part of a novella collection, and I'm going to include that here. So all told, it's 16 books. One of those is a trilogy. 3 of those books together is like a single trilogy, and I put that as a single book because it is that solid and that cohesive as a single book, and they would just get like the same position, like tied anyway, because I feel the exact same about all 3 books. So that is going to go into one place in my ranking, which you'll see when I get there. But I'm going to have 14 slots on this, and why don't we kick it off with the bottom? And it's just sad because I've enjoyed literally everything John Jackson Miller's written, but something has to be at the bottom. So my number 14 is going to be The Enterprise War. When I initially ranked this a couple years ago, this was up a few spots, but after giving it a couple years, I don't really remember it. I was not a Discovery watcher. I had watched the first 2 episodes when they were on CBS, and then they said, oh, you want to watch the rest of Discovery? You have to go to CBS All Access. I was like, well, I didn't own that. And this was, back in like 2017, streaming other than Netflix. You didn't really have it. So I did not end up watching the rest of the show at the time. I have since caught up a little bit. But I was like, you know what? I'll read the book just because it's John. And at the time, I really enjoyed it. I wrote such a positive review. And now going back, I'm like, I don't remember much from this. I know who the characters are involved. I know what the basic premise of the book was, but I don't really remember the book, which meant it just didn't stick out to me. So unfortunately, this goes at the bottom of the list for me. Number 14. Number 13 is a very sad case because I wanted it to be so much better, and that is his novel, Overdraft, The Orion Offensive. Now, if you want to read this book, you probably can't because it's no longer in print. It was originally through 47 North, which is a Amazon printing company, and they are no longer publishing this book. So unless you found a kind of copy on like eBay or ABE or something like that, you're not finding a copy of this book. But anyway, this is his original science fiction novel. It's a very light, fun, read. It's about basically this guy accidentally bankrupts his trading company, and so they send him off with the guys who do the actual trading up in space, and he has to go and work with them to try to make money for the company. And it's just goofy and silly, and it's a fun book, and I had a blast with it. But as is a great book, it's just fun. It's just I had some fun with it, but that's how I feel about my number 13. Number 12 book is a short story collection that includes a novella by John, and that is Lost Tribe of the Sith, the collected stories. This is, I think, like 8 or 9 short stories plus the novella that are all about the Lost Tribe of the Sith. This very much ties into the Fate of the Jedi series. It's not like if you read the Fate of the Jedi series and don't read this, you're missing it. But it's also not like there's this huge piece of the puzzle that oh my goodness, this illuminates everything. I read this before I ever read The Fate of the Jedi, and I was like, that was a fun read. And then when I read Fate of the Jedi, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that a little bit. But this takes place, in the Old Republic timeline when the Sith crash on the planet and they're separated out from the rest of the Sith and how they build their society. And you know what? It's a fun book. Really interesting, a very different type of storytelling for John. Yes, he likes to explore what characters do when they're alone. That's very much a theme in especially his Star Wars materials. But this one, seeing how the Sith are, he usually focuses on the light side. So this was interesting, but I really enjoyed it. So this is my number 12. My number 11 is his first novel, as it were, and that is Star Wars Knight Errand. This is a novel about Kira Holt in the Old Republic timeline. This is very much a good character, goody two-shoes trying to do the right thing. And I have a friend online, his name is Nazo, and he hates this book, and he hates this character. I loved it. I really like reading about this type of thing. I think that John brought some interesting ideas, particularly in how he portrays the Sith Empire as being an analog for communism. I thought that was really fascinating. Really, and how the Republic is more capitalistic, and just the ideas that he presented in this book, I thought were really fascinating. So I enjoyed that, but it's not one of his best. That's why this is going at number 11. So we have 14, 13, 12, 11. So we're getting into the top 10, finally. His top 10. The number 10 is a new release from this year titled The Living Force. This is basically the Jedi Council goes on vacation. Now, the premise of this book is that Qui-Gon Jinn has told the Jedi Council, hey, you guys are all focused on the big stuff, the cosmic force. You're not really focused on the living force. You're not really focused on what's happening today. And so he basically convinces the whole Jedi Council to get out of Coruscant, go to the planet Quinn, and basically to try to do something to help the people of Quinn. And so the Jedi Council goes there, not knowing that there's a big pirate type thing happening near that planet, and they get embroiled in that. And so you get stories from each Jedi Master, and it's just a fun story. Some of the characters, like Yariel Poof, is hilarious in this book, and Ki-Adi-Mundi is delightful, and getting to read from all these characters was really great. And so it was a really fun book. I enjoyed it. It lacked a certain magic that would put it in the upper echelons of Star Wars books for John Jackson Miller. So that's why this is my number 10. My number 9 is another kind of recent book, his most recent Star Trek book that came out last year, titled Star Trek Strange New Worlds, The High Country. This is the first hardcover for the Strange New Worlds series. The second one comes out very soon, or actually will probably already be out as this video goes out. And but it's written by Una McCormick. But this book is featuring the whole Enterprise crew from the Strange New Worlds TV show. It's got some great atmospheric storytelling. It's got a great kind of stranded on a planet trying to get back to the Enterprise story here. It was a fun book, but again, it didn't have that sauce that just puts it in the upper echelons, which is why it gets the number 9 spot for me. But it's an enjoyable book, as all of his books are enjoyable. That's the thing I don't want anyone to think, oh, it was at the bottom of your list, therefore it's a bad book. No, even at the bottom of my list, it's still enjoyable. All right, now we're getting into some of my favorites. Now we're getting into the hold up, Lem Cook. We're getting some good ones. We have this is number 8. That was number 9. This is number 8, and that is his contribution to Canto Bight, which is The Ride. So the Canto Bight is 4 novellas, one written by Saladin Ahmed, one by Ray Carson, one by Myra Grant, also known as Sean and Maguire, and then one by John Jackson Miller. He wrote the last novella, and it is the best novella in the collection, and it is a superb novella. This is, you may say, oh, Canto Bight, I didn't like that in Last Jedi. Okay, you don't have to enjoy that to enjoy this story. This story is about this guy who is trying to hit it big, get a big... He's trying to get a big score at the casino, and he's always having trouble with it. However, he runs across these 3 frog-like creatures, guys, that are basically good luck charms. And if he has them at the right connection and the right way and together and stuff, they will work for him, or I should say, their luck will work for him. And so he spends the whole novella trying to get them to be in the right place so that he will have good luck. And as Obi-Wan used to say, in my book, there's no such thing as luck. And so there's some unique turns, and it's called The Ride, and that's because it is quite a ride of a story. And it was delightful. Such an entertaining story. It's like 100 pages. You'll breeze through it. Totally worth it. And so that's why this goes in the number 8 spot. The number 7 book is the one that I was like, there's no way I'm going to enjoy that. And then I did. And that was his Star Trek novel, Picard: Rogue Elements. This was the book that John described as his fun book. During COVID, he was trying to write something fun, so he wrote this. This came out in, I want to say it was like 2021, maybe 2022. Yeah, somewhere around then. But, yeah, I think it was 2021. But this book, I believe it was a Scribe Award winner, or at least a nominee. And it had surprisingly a huge amount of heart and great action and great character development for Santiago Cabrera's character, and it had a great ship, a great description of the ship with the La Serena, and it was just entirely entertaining, and it also just had some really deep themes that I did not expect it to have, and of course it's got some connections to A Piece of the Action, a classic TOS episode that a lot of people love, and I was not the biggest fan of Picard seasons 1 and 2. I really did not like them. I didn't even care for this character in those seasons, but I really enjoyed the book. And it's one of the longer books by John. It's about 400 pages with kind of smallish print, but still, I really enjoyed this book. And Cristobal Rios, the main character, kind of grew on me a little bit. So I was really impressed by this book. So this is my number 7. My number 6. This was such a good book, and that is Star Trek Discovery Die Standing. Of like the what people call New Trek books, this is one of my favorite New Trek books. This is a kind of action spy thriller type book featuring Emperor Georgiou, which if you have been following Star Trek news, you know that they're doing a Georgiou movie, and I really hope there are some tie-ins from the movie into the book. Probably not, but I'm always hoping. But this book is it tells what happens to Georgiou after Section 31 kind of recruits her up. And so she is kind of investigating this mystery that is part of the trying to connect something that might be connected to the mirror universe where Georgiou is from, and it is delightful. She is such kind of a wicked character that's also got a heart of gold that you just are like, you're terrible, but I really enjoy reading about you. And I thought John did a tremendous job with her character. I thought that she was just really fascinating to follow. And so I really enjoyed this book. This book was just such a great spy thriller type book. With, of course, a lot of connections to classic Trek. But that's my number 6. So now we're getting to the top 5. And seriously, these top 5, in my opinion, are some of the best tie-in books ever. I think the best Star Wars tie-in book is on this list. I think the best Star Trek tie-in books are on this list. I think some of the best tie-in series are on this list. And I think just some really innovative stuff. So let's start with my number 5. What's my number 5 favorite John Jackson Miller book? Well, that's got to be A New Dawn. This is the first canon book, although it wasn't meant to be that, but it's the first canon book. It is about Kanan and Hera, a tie-in to Rebels. If you enjoy the Rebels TV show, this is a fantastic companion to it. It is a prequel that basically tells how did Kanan and Hera start their little rebellion that you see in the first episodes of Rebels. And it talks about why did Caleb kind of just abandon the Jedi after Order 66. You understand what happens. And even though the cover is a lie, he never ignites the lightsaber in the book. It is an entertaining romp. One of the best Star Wars villains is a one-off in this book. He only ever shows up in this book in like a short story, and that's Count Vidian. Count Vidian's amazing. We should get much more stories by him. He was great. I know that John just did a terrific job with this book. A great example of how to tie into a TV show while also being just a great novel on its own. If we had never gotten Rebels, this still would have been an entertaining story. There's just some great questions about surveillance, about government power, about the way that government works with business and business works with government. There's just such great themes as well as just being an entertaining story. Also, we get one of the best canon characters that we've gotten for Star Wars, and that is Rey Sloane. She shows up in this book. If you read the Aftermath books and you've read some of the other books in Star Wars, Rey Sloane is a great character. And so she is in this book. And so it's just such a good tie-in book. It put John in the annals of history by making him the first canon writer, first canon novel. And it really bridges the gap between the old and the new really well. So this is my number 5. My number 4. Everyone's going to complain about recency bias with this, but it's not recency bias. It's that good. And that is Batman Resurrection, the newest release by John Jackson Miller. This book is superb. I'm not a big Batman fan. I'm not a big Batman 1989 fan. I watched the movie once. It was all right. I enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't love it, but, I enjoyed it. But what John does with this book is incredible. It is not only a fantastic sequel, direct sequel to the movie, it takes place before Batman Returns. It's not only a direct sequel to 1989, it answers a lot of questions you would have. It really looks at what would be the fallout of 1989's Batman. It looks at what would it be like on the medical level, on the business level, on the ground level, on how would all of the Joker's thugs react after the events of the movie. All these questions are there. And it also just does a really good job with dealing with Bruce Wayne's PTSD, with dealing with his trying to figure out how to be Batman, how to continue on Batman now that he's killed or thinks he killed Jack Napier. And there's some great just really comedic scenes in this book. There's also some just great, excellent action sequences. There's some great twists in this book. The villains in the book are really good and very much fit the 1989 Batman aesthetic, I think, really well. And which, of course, John's a huge Batman 1989 fan. Just ask him to talk about it. He will talk for a long time. So I was blown away by this book. And you could say, yes, well, give it time. It's going to slip down your list. That might happen to, say, The Living Force and The High Country, his other recent releases. I do not believe that will happen with Batman Resurrection. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was superb, and he's getting a sequel, which I'm really excited. I hope he gets many sequels because he does a great job with this, and he actually sets up a sequel really well. I had a blast. This is such a great Batman book, and it gets me excited about the DC universe, which I'm not even a DC fan. I enjoy the Marvel Cinematic Universe a bit, but I'm not the biggest fan of the comic stuff, but I'm excited about DC after reading this book. So this is my number 4. Remember I said we're getting some of the best of the best? I recently made a best Star Trek standalones ranking video, and in that I mentioned that my favorite Star Trek standalone novel is Takedown, and that is still the case. It is my 3rd favorite John Jackson Miller book. It is my favorite standalone Star Trek book. It is a great Tom Clancy-esque thriller in space. It is basically like The Hunt for October, but with the Federation against itself. And there's some great themes about the Cold War, some great themes about different nations, and instead of these planets that are fighting each other. And this book is basically Riker takes control of a ship and starts going and destroying a bunch of relays. And Picard's like, what the heck are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing that. You don't have orders to do that. And so it's basically Picard chasing Riker throughout the book. And it's delightful. It has a fantastic twist, great connections to the Next Generation series. There's a few DS9 characters that show up, but it's really a Next Generation book. But this book is just how you write a standalone story. I was thrilled. I reread it recently, not recently, a couple years ago, but I read it initially in 2017 or 2018, and 2017 was when I read it, and I reread it in 2021, and it still held up. I do want to reread it again eventually, because I just love it. It's such a fun book. I could just breeze through it in a day or so. And so that is Takedown. That's my number 3 John Jackson Miller book. So now we're getting to my number 2. My number 2 is my favorite Star Trek trilogy or series that I've read. I've read a lot of Star Trek series. This one, it's and not just that. This is my favorite Star Trek story. I love some of the Star Trek movies, and there's some episodes of the TV shows that I particularly love, like the most recent season of Picard. Love that season. But this is my favorite Star Trek story as my number 2 favorite John Jackson Miller plot, and that is the Prey trilogy. You have the first book, Hell's Heart. The second book, The Jackal's Trick. I'm sorry that my books are kind of beat up. And the third book, The Hall of Heroes. This trilogy is action-packed, really deep themes about revenge, about the way government deals with kind of outcasts, the way that the way that people view black sheep of the families, things like that, as well as just having some great Star Trek storytelling, some great Klingon stuff. If you're a fan of the Klingons, this is the trilogy for you. It's such a good trilogy. There's also some great twists. It's got some great connections to the other Star Trek universe books. So if you read this and you're like, well, that was kind of interesting, well, it ties into a lot. You don't have to have read the other series. I had only read Takedown when I read this trilogy, and I totally understood what was happening because John does a good job of filling you in. So I loved this trilogy so much. It's my favorite Star Trek story ever. And I always am like, can you do another trilogy? That's why I'm really hopeful for the Batman books, because if the Batman books form a cohesive trilogy that does everything it's supposed to, it could rival this. But this is so amazing. So the Prey trilogy is my number 2 favorite John Jackson Miller book. Even though it's a trilogy, I'm counting it as one book. Because really it would get, they would tie, because I view the books as that close together. Maybe the first book, for nostalgia reasons, and the twist in the first book is my favorite, but seriously, I genuinely believe that they are, even with each other in quality. They're that good. But my favorite John Jackson Miller book is the one I've reread the most, the one that is my most reread book of all time, and the book that just I think I've said it's my number 2 favorite novel of all time. It really sticks with me. I love it. I know why some people don't, but I just connect to it so well, and that is Kenobi, which is a Scribe Award-winning book. It's to my knowledge the only adult Star Wars novel that has won the Scribe Award. But it was so deserving, and it had some tough competition that year. But it is the story to tell about Obi-Wan on Tatooine. It tells such a great story about how people view outsiders in their community. It tells such a great story about loss and grief and overcoming that grief. It tells such a great story about helping out others in need. It tells such a great Western story. I know Westerns have been done a lot in Star Wars with the Book of Boba Fett and with Mandalorian and things like that, but this is where we got true Western. It is a true styled after those old Western movies. And when you ask John about what his inspirations for this book, he goes through all these Western inspirations, and he's just a great knowledge of this stuff. And this book is just I got my English teacher in high school to read this book because I said this is I always say, in my opinion, all tie-in fiction should be considered literature if it's good, but some people just don't. But if I had to say, pick the media tie-in fiction book that would basically be considered literature, this is the book. It is my favorite Star Wars book. It is my favorite media tie-in book. It is amazing. So that is why it got my number 1 favorite John Jackson Miller book. And it has never been topped, and it might never be topped. I mean, some of these others came pretty close, but it's amazing. So that is my ranking of John Jackson Miller's books: Star Wars, Star Trek, Batman, his Overdraft book. Everything was all great. So if you've read any of these, let me know what your ranking would be. What do you think of mine? Am I crazy? Do you agree with my ranking? What do you think? Let me know in the comments section. Have you read all his books? If you've read all his books, I really want to talk to you because I don't know anyone else who has read all of them. I know people who have read most of them, but I don't know anyone who's read all of them. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.